Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the public, and to our city councilors. All councilors will be present this evening. Councilor Benton and Councilor Harris will be joining us shortly. Tonight is the 38th meeting of the 24th Council, and I will call this meeting to order. I've already addressed roll call. So with that, we will have a moment of silence. And I would like to bring attention to our former city councilor, Herb Hughes, who I worked with, and he was a great guy. I mean, he was just an exemplary counselor. And I know that most people know, but if in case that you don't, he passed recently. I would also like to bring attention to my uncle who just passed, 100 years old, and was one of the caretakers of his family, was one of the caretakers of the Santuario de Chimayo. So I just wanted to bring attention to him because these are two very distinguished people that have lived and had exemplary lives. Anyone else that has passed in your families, and people who have passed from COVID. So just take that moment, counselors. Thank you, counselors. So now we will move on to a Pledge of Allegiance, and I will go ahead and do that in English. You'll join me, please. And that should be up on your screen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Councilor Davis, would you be able to do this in Spanish for us?
On the fly, I will try, ma'am.
Thank you.
Please join us por los Estados Unidos de América y la República que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad de todos.
Thank you, Counselor. That was wonderful. Okay, with that, counselors, we're going to move on. And I just need to read some information for the public. As the public noted in our press release, we are joining you on our Zoom link tonight, and those are for some safety reasons. As noted in the press release from our office on Friday, posted on our website, and noted on our published council agenda, this meeting has special procedures and is being held via Zoom. Members of the public, city staff, and the media have the ability to view this meeting live through 4 different platforms: GOV-TV on Comcast Channel 16, the GOV-TV website, YouTube, and Zoom webinar. These live streams can be accessed from most smartphones, tablets, or computers. Also, this meeting is closed captioned, and you may enable the closed captioning services on your television or device at this time. For those of you watching on live stream, thank you for joining us this evening. The video recording of this and all past council meetings will also remain available at any time on the City Council's website. Council staff is available via telephone if members of the public need assistance finding the videos online. Please call 768-3100 for assistance during business hours, which are Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The council is accepting live general public comment today, as well as any written comments. Written comments received by 3 p.m. were distributed to all councilors in advance of today's meeting. And I would just mention that we had a number of written comments, councilors. I hope you had an opportunity to review those written comments before tonight. So with that, councilors, we will move on to proclamations and presentations. And tonight there are none. We will then move on to economic development discussion, and we do not have any this evening. So with that, counselors, we are going to move on to general public comments. I would also note that Counselor Benton has joined us, and it looks like Counselor Harris has also joined us. So just let the record reflect that. Before we start with our general public comments, and I saw that we had several people joining us this evening for live public comment, I would just like to read some comments to you. I would just like to welcome you. And we are also, we also received written comments that were distributed to all counselors in advance of today's meeting. For our public comment, you will be able to address the council if you have signed up for live public comment per the instructions published on the agenda and on our website on Friday. Speakers will be moved into the meeting room 2 at a time. They will remain muted with their camera off until they are called to speak, at which point they can turn on their camera, unmute themselves, and will have 1.5 minutes to provide comments to the council. After that, they will again be muted and return to be an attendee of the Zoom webinar. So these are the ground rules. Each participant has 1.5 minutes to present. Comments are to be addressed to the counselors only through the council president. Any disruptive conduct will result in removal from the Zoom webinar. Mr. Moya will be assisting me tonight with these live comments, and I will turn now to Mr. Moya to call the first speakers. Mr. Moya.
Thank you, Madam President. Our first speaker is Kathy Adams. Ms. Adams, please feel free to turn your video on, unmute yourself, and your time will begin when you start speaking.
Thank you very much for having me this evening. I expect to be rather brief with my comments. I'm speaking tonight about my concerns and the concerns of my neighbors with the revision of the Neighborhood Association Recognition Ordinance. I appreciate the effort that has gone into this product, and I certainly understand and believe that your earnest desire to rework the narrow was done in order to solve some neighborhood problems. I am certain that your intentions were well-meaning, but it is unfortunate this current draft fails to achieve the goals. I do not believe that you have solved significant problems, and I do believe that you have created some confusion and some problems that were unanticipated during the process. Concerned citizens really expected a different process. We wanted to contribute and communicate. We expected to collaborate with you. We believe that if we had an opportunity to do that, we would have a product that is more comprehensible and more coherent. It would have more clarity, and most importantly, it would have consensus. I believe that you need to start another process. I believe that you need to initiate a series of meetings at the neighborhood level. I think that this can be done easily through Zoom. You could even produce just some meetings that would be televised so that you could communicate with us what the goals were and what you think you achieved. I would certainly appreciate your efforts.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Our next speaker is Dr. Joe Valles. Dr. Valles, please feel free to turn your video on, unmute yourself, and your 1.5 minutes will begin when you start speaking.
Am I on?
Yes, sir. Please proceed.
Can you hear me? Okay. Well, thank you and good afternoon. And I share your moment of silence, Madam President, about her views. I knew him. And I think it was your grandfather that took care of Santuario. Is that correct?
Actually, it was my uncle.
Uncle, okay. Well, God bless him. I hope you read the letter that I sent in on behalf of the Inter-Coalition Council. It was a good meeting with representatives from all over the city. And I have there's some things that give me, that are worrisome for me. The provisions of the NARO do not have the scope or enforceability mechanisms to prevent the formation of new neighborhood associations that may create discord within the community and divide neighborhoods, which is contrary to the intent of the program. This is from R 2021-041, page 1, line 9. So under the standing neighbor, is there that much discord really throughout the city with neighborhoods? Because we don't share that. We don't share that at all. And why something like this is being mandated, I have no idea. Another provision limits the size of a neighborhood association to 1 square mile. What was the thinking behind that? We got a matrix, but we don't know what the thinking was that went into it by all the people that worked on this NARO. Payment of dues cannot be a prerequisite of membership or voting rights, and that dictating the payment of dues are not a prerequisite for membership. Hostile takeovers, they do happen. You got to be, how can we not charge dues to have a viable neighborhood association that has certain costs associated with it? That's almost,
Thank you, Dr. Valles. Your time is up.
Okay, the question is, what's the thinking? Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Carlos Tenorio. Please feel free to turn your video on, unmute yourself, and your time will begin when you start speaking.
First off, Madam President, I would like to express my deep, sincerest condolences to you with your loss of your uncle. I lost many family members during COVID, so I understand your loss. Good evening, distinguished members of the Albuquerque City Council. My name is Carlos Tenorio, known at the United Games as Sombrero Man. I'm here to talk about the stadium matter, in which that has brought up into a bond, hopefully. The stadium matter is near and dear to my heart, being a lifelong resident and a proud Burqueño. The stadium is not just for the here and now of Albuquerque, but for the future, for my kids and for my grandkids and 16, 17 generations down the line of Tenorios that will be here in Albuquerque. The city needs this beloved stadium for our beloved soccer team here to help the downtown area as well as the community around Borellis. I think we also need to work with the Borellis or Sawmill District neighborhoods, and I trust the city council as well as the mayor as well as New Mexico United will do that and to find a happy medium for everyone involved. Thank you for your time, and council members, somos unidos.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Shelley Barker. Ms. Barker, please feel free to turn your video on, unmute yourself, and your 1.5 minutes will begin when you start speaking.
Good evening. That's a hard act to follow. My name is Shelley Barker. I am an enrolled agent. I am an active member of the New Mexico Society of Enrolled Agents, and I would like to visit with you for just a moment about the tax preparer ordinance that you have passed, and some amendments are going to be presented to you later. The goal of this ordinance is wonderful. The intent is to protect the taxpayer from paying to have their tax return done by someone who isn't educated or compliant or may not even know the rules, may not even sign the tax return. The tax preparer ordinance is wonderful. It's a good thing in that it's asking the preparers to be competent, ethical, knowledgeable. It's asking the preparers to present a bill of rights to the taxpayer. It's asking the preparers to prove their name, their credentials, their qualifications, and that they have a PTIN number and a CRS number. However, the only problem we have is that those requirements of the tax preparer are not being, CPAs and attorneys are not going to have to follow them. Enrolled agents are. We are not excluded. But I want to remind all of you that on the federal playing field, CPAs and lawyers and enrolled agents, we all are bound with what is called Circular 230.
Thank you, Ms. Barker. Your time is up.
Okay.
Madam
Please.
President, looks like Councilor Davis may have a question or comment.
Counselor Davis?
Thank you.
Counselor Davis?
Thank you, Madam President. And Ms. Barker, I apologize. My internet connection's not so great, so I turned my video off so you hear me.
Yes.
So, Ms. Barker, you mentioned some proposed amendments. Have you or the other EAs had a chance to meet with them and see those amendments or discuss them with the administration?
Yes and no. We met with the policy division, Paul Hadel, and presented our concerns and amendments to him. He notified us that there would be an amendment presented to you this evening, but that enrolled agents are still not excluded from the ordinance, which is our concern.
Madam, it looks like.
Thank you, Ms. Barker.
Go ahead, Counselor Davis. I'm sorry. Thought you were done.
I'm sorry, Madam President. I was just going to tell Ms. Barker, thank you. And I would appreciate them reaching out
Madam, it looks like
to
there,
us to look at those
Counselor,
amendments before we're ready. So thank you.
Counselor Harris, just so you know, your audio is coming in and out also.
He wanted us to reach out to him. Is that what he said, you think?
I think that's what he said. There's also a question from Counselor Harris, it appears. Counselor Harris?
Yes, not a question, a comment. I'd be in favor of adding enrolled agents. I think they have a pretty high bar they have to meet, not as high as a CPA, obviously, but I think there's certainly, there's some controls that I think we can trust that would make it so that they should be treated the same for an ordinance.
Thank you, Counselor Harris. It's a pretty difficult to get to the credential of EA. Thank you.
Ms. Barker, when you have those amendments, I would appreciate if you would send them to my office, and you can also forward them to all the counselors if you'd like.
Thank you very much. Be happy to do that on behalf of the society. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us. Julia?
Madam President, I think Councilor Senna had her hand raised as well.
I don't see her on the, oh, there she is. Counselor Senna, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Ms. Parker. And also to, I know that there's an overall organization, and you said Society of Enrolled Agents, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And it's from my understanding after talking to an enrolled agent, are you guys also regulated by the Treasury Department?
That's exactly who we're regulated by, the Department of the Treasury. And CPAs, like you said, CPAs, attorneys, enrolled agents, we all are bound by what they call Circular 230. And we all have to have CE credits. We all have to have education. We all have to have CAF numbers. Even New Mexico has put us in the statute on a level playing field with CPAs and attorneys.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. I would love to follow up with you on that.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Phoenix Forrester. Please feel free to turn your video on, unmute yourself, and your time will begin when you start speaking.
Thank you. Good evening, Council President and councilors. My name is Phoenix Forrester, and I'm just here to express my opinion of no to building a soccer stadium at Broadway and Cole due to traffic, noise, disturbing of the residents. I've owned my duplex 1 block away for 18 years in Huning Highlands, and it is one of Albuquerque's historic neighborhoods. And I'd like to keep it that way with just residential and the few small commercial businesses on Broadway and Central. I actually have a picture of my property from 1892 when it was built, and it's still a beautiful home. And that's one reason we buy our property in Huning Highlands, because it has strict standards of keeping the original architecture. And also, I'd like to say, if a soccer stadium, I think it is unwanted progress, in my opinion. If the decision would be made that it would be on, I think it's 2nd and Iron, where near the rail yards and where Breaking Bad, some interesting scenes were filmed, that might be of interest. However, I additionally would vote no on funding unless Mr. I think it's
Thank you, Ms. Forrester. Your
Stunning.
time is up.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Keith Romero. Mr. Romero, please feel free to turn your video on, unmute yourself, and your time will begin when you start speaking.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, council members, Madam President. My name is Keith Romero, and I am a board member with the Barelas Community Coalition. I'm also a lifelong Bareleño with deep roots in that community. At the Barelas Community Coalition, we always find the difficulty in our role, at least as we see it, in striking that delicate balance between encouraging economic development and being stewards of that community and their interests. In this instance, despite the seemingly expedited process and lack of notice to our community, we are not wanting to be obstructionists in this regard. We view that as only a means of last resort in our view. However, as stakeholder representatives at the negotiation table, what we are asking for and demanding is a legally binding community benefits agreement based upon impact studies, expert legal consultation, and extensive community input of the impacted communities, not just Barelas. We ask that the city bear the financial cost of this process. We see it as a tremendous opportunity for the city to set the standard and use a national model or develop a national model for community inclusion to this end. Perhaps it could lead to success at the voting booth. We're cautiously optimistic. Time is short, but we believe a CBA, community benefits agreement, is crucial to the overall success of this project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Peter Travisani. Please feel free to turn your video back on, unmute yourself, and your time will begin when you start speaking.
Thank you, Madam President. And it's good to see everybody virtually. Just wanted on the stadium, I know there's been some great opinions before mine. Wanted to thank everyone for their opinion, and I know that New Mexico United is excited about this proposed bond and stadium. You know, we have a deep commitment to the community, which started long before talk of a stadium. And I think the community also made a big commitment to New Mexico United as we led the league in attendance in 2019 with over 12,000 people per game. And even with a lot of COVID restrictions and uncertainty, we're averaging over 9,000 people per game in our current season. But in 2020, when we weren't playing any games, we were still out in the community, and the community was still supporting with blood drives, supply drives. And I think that is the whole point, that this stadium, this cultural center, can be more than just a place where we play soccer. It can be a catalyst for whatever community it is located in terms of showing the vitality of Albuquerque, and also build a bridge of hope. And New Mexico United, to the extent we have a role, would welcome a chance to be part of a public-private partnership that could be a win-win. So we certainly plan on doing our part, and we're not really looking to get anything for free. We just want to be a part of this great project and make sure that we are working with the community, including the people who have spoken before us that have concerns. We want to the extent that we can help facilitate those conversations, we'd like to do so and show that we're supportive and want to make sure that this doesn't disrupt anyone. So thank you so much for your time today and for considering this proposal, and we look forward to further discussion.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Althea Altheron. Please feel free to turn your video back on and unmute yourself, and your time will begin when you start speaking.
Hi, Madam President. My name is Althea Atherton, and I have been proud to call Albuquerque home for the past 5 years. I'm speaking to you today to urge you to pass and fully fund the Zero Fare Bus Pilot Program. As someone who does not drive for medical reasons and relies on the bus to get around, I know that increased ridership and more frequent headways, our system would be greatly improved. Kansas City's test case shows that these programs facilitate rider increases, which means we'd all benefit from fewer traffic fatalities, congestion issues, and it would prevent would-be DWIs, and our lungs would all be grateful for the cleaner air we'd have. It would remove a budget line item for the most vulnerable households in our city in these unprecedented economic times, and it means one less opportunity for racial targeting and fare enforcement. As we are in the process of legalizing a substance that intensifies the effects of alcohol, it would be one fewer barrier from choosing the safe way home from the bar or your friend's house or a safe consumption site without having to worry if you have the cash or the fare to access the e-ticketing services. This city will always have people like me who cannot drive for whatever reason or another. And we all deserve equitable transportation, and we deserve to be able to participate in society and our city at large. The Zero Fare program would help make this city more hospitable and accessible to people like me with disabilities. And I urge you to please pass it and make sure there are no barriers for our riders here. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Paul Hawley. Mr. Hawley, please feel free to turn your video on, unmute yourself, and your time will begin when you start speaking.
Thank you, Madam President. My name is Paul Hawley. I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I live in District 3. I own properties in District 2. This is regarding the bond election for the multipurpose soccer stadium. First, I want to empathetically state that I am not anti-stadium, nor am I anti-New Mexico United. I think we have a lot of support at the moment, and that is just absolutely wonderful. However, I'd like to point out a couple of very serious deficiencies in the study. Out of 356 pages of the multipurpose soccer stadium study, part 2, there's only 22 pages devoted to an economic impact analysis. This is the analysis we really need to be concerned about. There's very little information dedicated to the true impact in the Albuquerque area, not to mention the downtown core. Page 282 of 356 in part 2 of the feasibility study, and I'm going to quote here, all resident spending is assumed to be displacement spending, also called substitution, and would have occurred without the presence of the projects. Such spending is not included, end quote. That sentence is not included. A true economic analysis would include such items. Where is this revenue going to come from, and whom is it going to impact? I think downtown businesses need to know, Albuquerque citizens know, we as taxpayers really want to know. You know, on page 282, it also states this economic analysis was brought to you by M-Plan. That's an impact analysis for planning. These types of proprietary models.
Your time is up.
Thank you much.
Our next speaker is David Carl. Mr. Carl, please feel free to turn your video on, and your time will begin when you start speaking.
Hi there, councilors. Madam President, thank you so much for having us here today. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak on this important issue. I'm speaking in favor of the stadium proposal. Wanted to specifically talk about how important the community impact is, and just welcome councilors, welcome city officials, and welcome the community to meet with us to the extent that we can be helpful, and kind of talk about these things moving forward, and the impact that something like this can have on the community going forward, on civic pride, on economic impact, as the last speaker mentioned. And I certainly, again, wanted to just welcome the community to have those conversations, to reach out to us to the extent that we can be helpful, and just appreciate the city's time. So thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rebecca Hampton. Ms. Hampton, please feel free to turn your video back on, unmute yourself, and your time will begin when you start speaking.
Hello, what is good, everyone? My name is Bex. I'm an activist with the Party for Socialism and Liberation. I'm here to speak against the use of $70 million in public financing to build a brand new soccer stadium. Tim Keller, the mayor, said we have earned a stadium, but I want to ask, like, what do working people have to do to earn a cancellation of their rent debts, their medical debts, and all kinds of other debts? What do we have to do to be worthy of a living wage? This is a serious mismanagement of funding when we have so many issues facing working people in New Mexico. 1 in 3 children in New Mexico currently are going hungry. The Chamber of Commerce also said the stadium is a downtown effort to reduce the impacts of homelessness on downtown businesses and residents. This is a disgusting, anti-human assertion with no care for the people who are experiencing homelessness, but only shows they care only for profit. Why not use $70 million to end homelessness? Or better yet, we have thousands of vacant homes and apartments that could already easily be used to house the unhoused. Again, I'm here to speak out against the $70 million in public financing. It should be used for people's needs first, not for soccer stadiums. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Cole Cottrell. Cottrell, please feel free to turn your video on, unmute yourself, and your time will begin when you start speaking.
Thanks, everyone. I'm actually up here in Tacoma to see our United play yesterday, so my voice is a little sketchy, but my name is Cole Cottrell, and I was born and raised in Albuquerque. I went to UNM for architecture, and I recently just bought my first piece of property in downtown. A common theme in the answers to questions like why build the stadium in downtown, or why not just use the UNM football field, is the desire the club has to benefit the city. That is a common thing that the team has talked about since day one. Its goal is to elevate our city and state to new levels. The focus isn't just soccer, just as the focus of the stadium would not be just soccer, but being a symbiotic boost for our quality of life in the city. With UNM, corporations like the NCAA would not have our city or franchise's best interests in mind, and it would also take away the money the team brings in for helping those in need via the Somos Unidos Foundation. Using UNM doesn't also do anything for growth in downtown for all the businesses that are down there already, which is a major point of putting the stadium down there. Public transportation to the UNM fields is bad, the march to the match is dangerous, and there aren't any businesses within walking distance that benefit from the thousands of people at the tailgates. Think like bars in downtown Denver on a game day versus in Albuquerque. We wonder why we can approve money for a shelter, but then no one will vote to put it in their neighborhood. We always focus on immediate reasons not to do stuff instead of focusing on the big picture. If it's not one negative, it's another. United as a club has already done so much in service of our state off of the field while putting our state on the map while they are on the field. A stadium would not only further that work and help our downtown, but it would also tell future generations that we aren't so focused on our issues to think big picture. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you.
Mr. Cottrell, are you related to Marion Cottrell?
I am. He's my uncle, or was my uncle.
And he just passed away as
great,
well.
yeah, sorry, great uncle. And Howard as well just passed away, but he was my grandfather and the engineer on the pit. So
I used to work for Marion Cottrell when he was a county commissioner.
Right on. That's very cool.
It's great to see you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Our next speaker is Jeremiah Montoya. Mr. Montoya, please feel free to turn your video on, unmute yourself, and your time will begin when you start speaking.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeremiah. I'm also a member of the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and I'm here just speaking in opposition to the United Stadium. I, like many Albuquerque people, love watching United play. However, I cannot support the establishment of a stadium at this time. The city is acting as if United having a stadium is a crisis, when in fact we are facing actual crises right now, especially in the economic fallout of COVID-19. We are facing rampant homelessness on the streets. We are facing people starving, living in low-income housing. We need to put that money toward people's needs to support them and build them up instead of another soccer stadium or sports stadium in Albuquerque. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Shelby Cohen. Ms. Cohen, please feel free to turn your video on, unmute yourself, and your time will begin when you start speaking.
Hi, my name is Shelby Cohen, and I work with several organizations in the city, including Albuquerque Mutual Aid. I wanted to come forward and express my opposition of the new stadium. I think that this is a gross lack of priority on the part of the city. We have so many other pressing issues that come before a stadium. Right now, we have nearly 500,000 people facing loss of power due to the moratorium on utilities being lifted, as well as the oncoming threat of many, many people losing their housing. And I think that should come way before building a stadium that will only benefit few and displace so many people that have been in that community for generations. It is a gross use of public funding and it must be stopped.
Thank you. Madam President, we had a few others signed up to speak, but they have not joined the meeting, so that will conclude public comments.
Thank you, Mr. Moya. With that, we will conclude our public comment for this evening, councilors. So we will move on to item number 5, which is administration question and answer period. And we will begin our discussion with Counselor Davis. Counselor Davis, are you in the queue?
Madam President, if you would pass me for just a minute, I'm going to find a better internet connection.
Okay, Counselor Davis, with that, then I will move on to Counselor Benton and Bassan, and then we will come back to you. Counselor Benton?
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, I do have questions for Director Simon. I see he's on the call. Hopefully he's feeling better and can actually speak. But and I did give some heads up to Director Simon that this was what I was going to be asking about, and something that we've talked about many times over the years, but just wanted to check in again on behalf of some constituent question. And specifically with regard to park hours, Director Simon, I know that we have sort of a standard policy of hours, and then we have some exceptions for certain parks. And I wanted to see if you could remind us of what those are.
Sure. Thank you, Councilor Benton and members of the council. Sound bad, feel great. You know, the city's park ordinance states that hours at parks are essentially 6 a.m. to 12 midnight unless otherwise posted. Virtually every park in the city is posted for park hours of 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Okay, and I know that in the past we've had discussions about that certain parks might be better served to have a dawn to dusk or dusk to dawn, I should say, closure. Is that still something that is there anything to prevent us from doing that?
Councilor Benton, Madam President, no, nothing would prevent us to do that. We actually have 2 parks where we currently enforce a closure at dusk. The reason we do that is because we have written agreements with neighborhood associations who've stepped forward to close those gates at dusk. Otherwise, we'd have it would be very, very difficult to enforce that.
Understood.
So, yeah, I mean, I think there's nothing that would prohibit that from happening. And as with most laws, a lot of it's about the enforcement.
Right, and in discussions with both yourself and previous parks directors, and these are discussions having to do with various activities in the park, but one of which is the presence of people in the park after those hours, and where APD did get involved. But only to the extent that those hours would warrant it. So also, just on this related question, I'll just be right up front. This has to do with Coronado Park, and also has to do with I don't know if this is technically a park anymore at Wells Park. The green space, is that yours or is that Family Community Service? The little group, the former.
Madam President, Councilor Benton, the Wells Park itself is the green space that is adjacent to the Johnny Tapia Community Center. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So that one's both of those have been seeing some impact from people camping. I'm not sure what the hours are that they're there. I think they have the right to be hanging out during park's open hours. Some limitations, I think, with regard to structures or tents or 3-sided, 4-sided shelters. But these are just questions that I'm receiving from stakeholders in the area of those 2 parks. But I won't take any more of your time or make you talk any more than necessary. Thank you, Mr.
No,
Director.
happy to answer the questions. Thank you very much, and happy to provide any other.
Madam President, if I might just, this is Lawrence in the mayor's office, to Councillor Benton's question. I just want to let you know, Councillor, that the mayor is well aware of what's happening and has had the same conversations I think that you're having with some of the neighbors and some of the folks around that particular facility. We've asked our security division from DMD to do some patrols there and to help with the issues that are occurring there. So we'd be happy to sit with you this week and give you a little up to date on what we're doing and working with Family and Community Services, because he's equally as concerned about the situation. So we'd be happy to do that with you.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rael. Thank you, Councillor Benton. Did you have any other comments?
No, thank you, Madam President.
Madam President, I have a question regarding this topic, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you. Director Simon, I love your aquatic center behind you, first of all. I'm hoping that that's a vision of my future, just teasing. But I'm wondering, I know that it's probably more than not, like we're probably having these problems at more parks than we are not having them at right now. But since we're talking about it, and Mr. Rael, with what you brought up as well, I think that we've had a chronic problem at Vista del Norte that I know we've been hearing about. I know that the security division has gone out several times to remove the same two cars, and we haven't been able to quite mitigate the problem there. So rather than, it's really not a question for you, Director, but I'd love to hear more or be involved in any of these conversations on what the mayor is doing and what the city is working on, so that we can try to mitigate these problems for those people that are both camping and living at the parks, as well as for those people residing near the parks that don't want this to happen. And I still like your pool.
Thank you. That's I've just returned from Tokyo, where I won exactly 0 medals. But you know, where we have parks that have gates, Counselor, you know, we can do a better job to close those gates at night, and that doesn't eliminate problems, but it does help address one aspect of uses in parks that we don't want to happen. So Vista del Norte is one of those parks where we want to add in gate closing to our operations, to our standard operations. And when we do that with the support that the council gave us for security enhancements, I think we can make an improvement there.
That is great news to hear. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councillor Bassan. We have 2 other councillors that would like to ask questions, Councillor Pena and then Councillor Davis. So Mr. Simon, please don't go away yet.
Thank you, Madam President. So this is, I guess, Lawrence and Director Simon. As you know, I've called you on several parks as well, so I won't rehash the issue. It's just a major concern here at Alamosa Park, at Westgate Heights Park, at Tower Park, and I just get numerous constituent calls. I just called Director Simon this past week because we have the free lunches at Alamosa Park, and there are 2 people kind of living under this shade structure, and some of the parents feel uncomfortable taking their children to pick up the free lunches because they're having a few issues. So same issue, different park. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pena. Councillor Davis, you had your hand up as well.
I was just jumping back in for my questions for other departments, ma'am. I don't have any questions for Mr. Simon.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Simon. We hope that you feel better. And next time, bring home the gold. We are going to go on to Councillor Bassan, and then we will jump to Councillor Davis. Councillor Bassan.
Thank you, Madam President. I had submitted some questions for the administration, and it's some follow-up to some earlier questions that we had a few months ago with the new internal affairs investigators and the police reform department. I know that we had, I think, been told that, I don't remember actually if it was that the current investigators are just laterally moving over to this department or if we're hiring new ones. And I was wondering if we can get an update on that. Did we hire new investigators, or are they just moving over laterally?
Is there someone from the administration that is prepared to answer?
Madam President and Councillor Bassan, may I ask your indulgence? We're getting the right folks from APD to connect. And if you wouldn't mind, if you want to go to other questions, we'll come back to yours.
Councillor Bassan, if you would yield for a minute, and then I'll go on to Councillor Davis, and then we can come back while they connect.
That's completely fine, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davis, thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. And thank you for your indulgence in my bad internet. I hope we get that fixed. I can barely see, but I think I see Director Whalen in the mayor's conference room. Is he? There he is. He just popped up. Director, thank you so much for joining us. I know we got a chance to send some questions ahead of time, and so I know you're well prepared. First, I want to say thank you. I think the community, we've gotten a lot of comments about bringing back the plastic bag ban as we move out of the pandemic, and I understand that that is back in place. My first question is, can you just confirm that that's the case and that the administration is now enforcing that ban?
As of yesterday, the bag ban is back in effect, and it's the original ban that was put into place back prior to the pandemic. It was almost like we just pushed a pause, and now we've taken that off and we're beginning it back starting yesterday.
Thank you, Director and Madam President. And Director, one follow-up, and I know we've had some conversations and we've seen some comments here in these meetings with people asking us as we bring this back, what we can do to strengthen the enforcement, to limit the use of so-called recyclable bags that are much thicker, the ones that you have to sort of use 1,000 times before they become recyclable. I happen to have one here from Target that I picked up yesterday that says it's recyclable. But is our recycling system accepting these types of bags now? I understood originally we were not.
Madam President and Councillor Davis, sorry I didn't address you properly before I answered the last question, but Madam President, Councillor Davis, so what it is we've never accepted any type of bag in our recycling stream, whether it's one of these reusable bags or any type of bags. Our recycling system has never been set up to take bags. Those have always been returned to the stores and then they recycle them. The 2.25 bag that you're looking at right there, those are made from recycled materials and they can be used up to 120 times. So that was how the definition was established, is that it's a reusable bag, not a single-use bag.
And Madam President, Director, if I could just follow that and just say, I know we've had some conversations and folks have asked, and there's some flexibility built into the law in that it gives the Director of Solid Waste the ability to issue rules that determine what's acceptable and what's not. Can you tell us a little bit about next steps in the process from the administration in addressing these? I think there's a universal sort of belief that these are sort of exploiting a loophole in the rulemaking process, and there's some interest in closing that.
Council President and Councilor Davis. Yeah, so when we started the bag ban, we started a process, and the ordinance didn't have a definition of what was acceptable and what wasn't. That was left up to us to define. So we had to come up with a definition so that environmental health could enforce it, because there was no actual definition in the ordinance for them to enforce. So based on what we did, we came up with a definition, and we instituted that definition of what was acceptable. We got 9 weeks in prior to the pandemic, and we started tracking what stores were doing, and we made that definition to see how the responses were done. And per the ordinance, based on that definition, we were going to do a study, and based on that study, we're going to have a group that's put together per the ordinance of several different people from several different departments, and then based on that, they were going to make a recommendation after 1 year on how to strengthen that ordinance. Back when the ordinance was passed, said it was an initial first step on how we could move forward. And so because we never really got to move all the way through that, we put in something in place where we're going to be taking up as much information as we can within the next 3 to 4 months. We're going to gather that information. We're going to put it to this task force. It's not a task force. It's I can't think of the exact wording, but it includes people from your office, the mayor's office, my office, and then they will make a recommendation back to council by the end of 2022 of what the next definition should be.
Thank you, Director and Madam President. Just to close and thank you, I appreciate that, Director. I just happened to pull the wall up and I wanted to mention, yeah, it's what we call a temporary administrative committee to make that recommendation. The law calls for it in the second half of the fiscal year. So as you said, in January, but it does call for a report, but I just want to be clear, from my perspective, and I know we talked about this originally, we wanted to have some flexibility, but certainly we want to see that these bags are, I think they are not allowable. And I hope the administration would move forward to do that. I don't think you need a change from the I don't think there needs to be a change in the law. I think we just need a change of definition. So thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Council President, Councilor Davis, I do have your list of questions and I will be sending over some more detailed responses as well.
Thank you, Councilor Davis. It looks like Councilor Gibson has a question.
Yes, Madam President, I do. Actually, I just want to indicate my support generally for what Councilor Davis just said. And I appreciate solid wastes, your department, you and your department working on this and trying to find solutions. But, you know, I think that what our intention was to use less plastic rather than put more plastic out on the market. And I kind of feel like we're missing that by allowing the thicker plastic bags. And I it's nobody's fault. I'm not, pointing any fingers anywhere. It's just that I hope that this group will come back with some good thoughts and suggestions maybe on how we can get back on track. Thin plastic bag can be used many, 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 many times. I've got them in the back of my car still. So, and they can be thrown away just as quickly as the Target bags can. So, multiple use is really in the eye of the beholder. And that's a practice that people either create a habit in using plastic bags that way, or they don't, But I think if we can all agree that our goal here, our intention is to lessen the demand on plastic, the demand for plastic, that should be where we start from. So my thoughts.
Council President and Councilor Gibson. So even though we were only 8 to 9 weeks into the initial bag ban, we were already seeing, I know there were some big box stores that kind of used a thicker bag, but we were already starting to see that less plastic was being used. There were several stores that were not giving out bags at all. Lowe's and Home Depot were not giving out bags. So that's a reduction of plastic. Certain Dollar Trees were making you buy a bag. Certain Walgreens were going and making you buy, and they were giving paper bags. So that's what we're going to do this next, starting September 1st, we're going to give the stores 30 days to adjust. And starting September 1st, we're going to start going and contacting every store to see how they've changed their behavior. And that's the study that's the information we're going to present to this council, so that they can see, well, okay, yes, we did reduce in certain areas, but these other stores adjusted this way. And then they can make a recommendation of a new definition of what is acceptable that can be enforced.
Yeah, so all of those examples that you gave was, that I heard anyway, were no plastic, less plastic or no plastic. That's the way we want to go. We don't want thick plastic. We don't want to put more plastic into the into the marketplace. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gibson. We have Councilor Brisson and then Councilor Pena are waiting in the queue. Councilor Brisson.
Thank you, Madam President. So I wasn't here when this plastic bag ban went through the council. I definitely have been to Lowe's and they're not giving out bags. They never were during COVID at all, in all of 20 when this was enacted. I do believe that there is absolutely the need to reduce plastic usage where we can, but I also think that there is a need for single-use plastic or something of the like. And I think people are going to find a way to use it for picking up dog waste. Or I have a constituent we've all heard from picking up litter and cigarette butts every day along Ventura that no one really frankly wants to put those in reusable bags. But I use reusable bags and I also use plastic bags. What I would like to know, and my question is, what are we doing now that COVID is coming back? What are we doing now that we're shutting down again and the D variant is happening? Are we premature on this too? Because if we're saying that we can't do our in-person meetings, if we're saying now we're looking at wearing masks again, shouldn't we be saying this should still be a ban or this should be an unban, I guess? I mean, where do we draw the line? So has the administration considered looking into the safety of the public and the purpose of these being able to use plastic? And because I think the public is really still very sensitive, and they should be, for the safety of the same reasons that we did this all last year.
Councilor President and Councilor Basson, the ban bag just got reenacted, and we'll just continue to adjust as things change, just kind of like we have done for the last 16, 15 months. Things can change from one week to the next. And I think as things develop, we'll adapt, we'll adjust, and we'll move forward. But I think the bag ban is a very good idea. All in favor of using reusable bags. That's why when we make the recommendation to the committee, it won't be, we can't say no plastic, because even your reusable bags that we have all over the place, these are made of plastic. So you have to come up with a definition that doesn't exclude your reusable bags that you use. But safety is a major concern, and the administration took the safety of our grocery stores into account when the pandemic hit, and we will adjust as need be.
Madam President, if I may follow up, please.
Go ahead, Councilor.
Thank you, ma'am. I guess, and thank you for that, Director. My question, I think, is also really, CAO Nair, are you there? Or is somebody there in the mayor's conference room to say, are we intending to continue this plastic bag ban right now when things are looking a little unstable again, when we could maybe hedge some of this and be a little bit, we can be abundantly cautious, which is what we're now hearing again after we got used to not hearing it. Should we consider still allowing plastic bags for now before we start doing studies and we start asking about usage or not, while people are very sensitive to this?
Madam President and Councilor Bassan, I think the question really deserves further discussion with the mayor. At this point, we opted to begin the enforcement of the ban simply at the behest of some of your colleagues and, quite frankly, of the community. And we were in a different place just a couple of weeks ago. And as Director Whalen said, as things have changed, there may be a need for us to have a conversation again about to what degree the change directly impacts our ability to carry out this particular, if you will, program. We've not we've not made a change at this point, but certainly as things move forward in the next couple of days or so, there may be a need for us to review this. And so we'll be hoping to keep you all informed and certainly give, especially the retailers and others, enough notification if something does change. But we appreciate your concern with it, and we certainly share that.
Thank you, Mr. Real. I definitely want to just make sure that I'm on the record of saying I think that we're premature on getting rid of the use of plastic bags right now.
Thank you, Councilor Bassan. Councilor Pena?
Thank you, Madam President. I guess my questions are similar to Councilor Bassan's. I didn't know, I thought maybe it would come before us, I'm sure, not everything has to, but now that we're re-implementing the ban, I have similar concerns. Well, one, just to start off with, is that when we talked about this initially, Director Wade and I had mentioned that, in San Francisco, they used these plastic bags that were recyclable. So is it that Friedman doesn't, can't, won't? What's the issue there with those bags? That's just the one question. And then second is that, I think during COVID, we learned a lot, right? And even though we're trying to do safety for us, many of the cashiers, and talking to many of the cashiers, raised the concern numerous times when I was at the grocery store that really, they didn't even really want the bags that we were bringing back in, because we were just bringing those germs to them, right? Because we have them in our car, the kids, dogs, whatever the case may be. So I would really hope that we can kind of be creative, and I think the reusable plastic bags, I mean, I hate them because they're so thick, but if they're recyclable, as I was told that they were recyclable, I think that's really a means to get to where we need to, as long as they're being recycled. So Director, if you can start with the first question.
Council President and Councilor Pena, thank you for that question. So Friedman has never accepted even the single-use plastic bags. We've always told people not to put those in your blue can. We don't do any recycled bags, whether it's the thick ones, the single-use, or any grocery stores. We've always told people to take those back to the grocery stores because they've had boxes in their lobbies for you to take the single-use or the other plastic bags back. And the amendment that you had that was for the it wasn't the 2.25 thickness, it was the makeup of the bag. It was a number 2 type of recyclable. So we've never accepted those at Friedman. We've just never had the ability to do that there. So that's the first issue with either the single use or the multiple use bags. Even your bags like the ones we gave out, the ones you guys gave out.
Madam President, Director, so can they? I mean, you know, I think that was where I was headed towards back then, is that, you know, if they're recyclable, because not everyone takes them back to the grocery store. And I'm not sure the grocery store wants even the single-use ones back either. Again, hence all the germs. Yeah. So can Friedman do that? Do they have maybe they're not doing it now, but do they have the ability to do that?
Council President and Council Pena, no, they've never accepted them since the inception. They've always been sent back to the grocery stores prior to COVID, because the grocery stores are able to recycle those. So that's why we've always said, don't put them in your blue can, because they can become tanglers or they can become something else. And that's why we say, don't bundle your recyclables and tie them at the top, because it's hard for the recyclers to open it. So we've never been able to accept any type of bag, whether it's a single use or a multi-use bag, or even one of our bags that we have given away. And to answer the second part of your question about COVID, so on July 1st, when the state opened back up, we didn't want to institute the bag ban right away. We wanted to give grocers 30 days, and we began running advertisement and letting people know that, hey, if the state is opened up and we're in the green state, then this is coming back in 30 days. And then, like I said, in the next 30 days, if everything holds constant, then we'll begin the study that we need to do.
Okay, Madam President, and then Director Whalen. So back to what Councillor Bassan said, just switching back and forth is a tremendous cost to these businesses. So I'm not comfortable, you know, asking them to maybe in a week, if we close down, that they can stop doing that again. I mean, it really sends mixed messages, especially during this tough time. The smaller businesses I'm concerned about. So
Council President and Council Pena, I agree. That's why we did not change the definition. We had an initial definition back when we started this, and people were saying we needed to change it because grocers changed to a different type of bag. And we felt we couldn't do that because we started with one definition. We needed to see how it was affected, and then we needed to move forward and make a recommendation to this committee. But as everything that's going on with COVID, we just have to adjust as we go.
And then just one final thing, Madam President, Director Whalen, I think we really have to consider the reusable bags that we're bringing in. I really think that it is a health issue, and the pandemic isn't going anywhere, you know, for quite some time. And these issues are rising. So I would really love for us to look at how those recyclable plastic bags, what we can do to you know, utilize those and make sure that we have a mechanism in place to where they do get recycled, because for myself, I really don't want to put people's lives at risk and be taking my bags that I have in the back of the car with whatever in there to our grocer.
Council President, Council Pena, we will definitely look into that. And we'll continue to work with Friedman Recycling to see if they can expand the types of materials they can take. And we're working with them right now. The recycling study just came out. I plan to meet with you based on that study here in the next week or two. And we're going to continue to move forward. And if it is something that Friedman can do, we will definitely put that on the table for them to add. And then we'll continue to just adjust when it comes to COVID restrictions.
One final thing, Madam President. Yes, I'd love to do that because I read that and I just think that there's a lot more that they could be doing. And so my final question is, when does their contract end?
Madam President and Council Peña, I think it ends at the end of 2023.
Okay, thank you.
And just to follow up, Mr. Whalen, with the line of questioning from the council, I think it's really important that, you know, if there are issues in the future, and I know we have a contract and there's a scope, and that's kind of what we have to meet. But if there's things that the council can help the department with, we do have an upcoming budget adjustment, and we do want to ensure that we're doing everything in our power to ensure that we have the technology and the best technology that there is to offer for this type of recycling. So I really do appreciate all the questions the counselors asked regarding this, because it's like anything else. I mean, people in the market want to have some predictability, but also we need to be looking at what is available to us out there as a community. So thank you for that.
Council President, thank you, and I appreciate council's support.
So with that, counselors, Councilor Brisson, we're going to go back to you.
Thank you, Madam President. I see Chief Medina here tonight. Thank you, Chief, for joining us. I had some questions regarding the new police reform department and the current investigators that are doing the internal affairs investigations. Did we laterally move them from where they were when they were underneath your branch? Now, did we laterally move them to the police reform branch, or did we hire new investigators?
A combination of both, Councillor. Madam President, Council, thank you for having me here this afternoon. There's a combination of both, Councillor Bazan. What we did is we had probably about 12 that were assigned there. Those numbers may not be exact. And at the same time, as they were moved over, we opened civilian spots that we have been filling with hiring new civilians to take over those investigations. So between the two efforts, we have to get to 25, which was the amount that was specified in the stipulated order with the United States government in terms of the CASA agreement.
Thanks, Chief. And then, so you said 25 is what we need to be in compliance. And is it our intention that we're going to just have civilians and then eventually or are we going to have a mix?
Eventually I'd like to get as many civilians as possible. And the more civilians we could get, to me, the better, because I'd like to bring over as many sworn as possible. But the sworn would have to leave there because they did bid into those positions, and we'd have to continue to allow them to remain there before we were able to replace them. So I foresee in the near future that it's going to be a mix with eventually, hopefully, just completely growing into civilians handling that role.
Thanks, Chief. So can you elaborate, or I don't know if this is for Superintendent Stanley. I don't know how you guys are dividing this up, because I guess I thought I was under the impression that the superintendent is the one that oversees this part of what I'm asking about, but maybe you guys kind of tag team that. So I'm wondering what the caseload is for each investigator.
I don't have those specifics because this is something for the superintendent. But what I can tell you right now is the caseloads are, and just use this as an estimate, is approximately, I think they've said somewhere about 35 use of force cases a week. And we got to divide that times 52 more or less, and then we divide it by the 25. Their caseload is not as high as you would think for a variety of reasons. I've been told that it takes up to 56 hours for them to investigate a use of force. So when you're looking at that much time, plus doing getting the presentation ready, presenting it to Force Review Board, you're looking at they probably could clear maybe 2 cases a month.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Chief. So I have more questions that I know are going to fall under your purview, but I don't know if Superintendent Stanley is available, or I can also just wait until the next council meeting. I had submitted these questions in advance, and I was hoping to get some answers kind of with some of the stats on what this division is doing and what their caseload is exactly. And if we can get an update maybe and have him come, I don't know if the administration can make sure to add that on there for the August 16th meeting. I would prefer that. And then Chief, for you, I have had a few conversations lately that are mind-blowing to me. And I learned that APD marked vehicles, and I'm hoping that you will correct me if I'm wrong, but I learned that the new APD marked vehicles in particular, because I realized the older ones, I shouldn't even be worried about that and barking up the tree, they don't come with radar detectors installed in them.
No, they do. Well, in reality, ever since I've been here 26 years, they've never come standard with radar units. We did just purchase, myself and the administration, we worked and we did generate the funding, and we purchased 100 units for to install in the first 100 police cars that we have, newer cars preferably. And our plan is from here forward to put them in half of the cars that we're purchasing, so that at least eventually half of our fleet has radars. But yeah, that's something that this administration is the first to invest in a widespread use of radar in marked units.
I'm glad to hear that we're doing that. I am a very big advocate of making sure we continue to do that, especially when we're talking about making sure that our fleet has the proper, I mean, I'm kind of like, do they come with tires or do we have to upgrade those? Because I figured in a city where we have such a speeding problem that our officers would have radar detectors in their vehicles, and to find out that that's not standard is truly disappointing. So I'm happy to hear that we're getting 100. I think we need to get more. I also learned that I learned a handy dandy, I learned the acronym, even though I don't know what it stands for, but the LiDAR guns, those are the laser radar detector guns that officers will stand and point them at cars to see how fast they are going. I learned that those get checked out to what I'm going to say is the equivalent of a library book. And officers have to go and check them out if they're going to use them. So how many do we have?
Generally, there is, and we'll have to get exact numbers. There's generally about 10 per area command. There could be more or less depending on what's gone on in the past few years. And that's been the process since I was a patrol officer. You would check out a LiDAR, you'd give it back. And that's why I think this administration is doing a great job in the fact that we've taken the steps to start formalizing this as basic issue equipment, so it's more readily available to various officers. And we want to be careful to put it in every single unit, because we're looking to see which officers give the most tickets to begin with, because I don't want to put it in a unit to somebody who doesn't give a big amount of traffic tickets to begin with.
Thank you, Chief. I think that I think personally that every single one should have it, because I think that if there is downtime in a city that's crying out for help with speeding, this would be great. That, I mean, I'm the first one to say that I'm sure that there is no downtime for officers, but let's pretend like we're going to get to that point. I think that they need to have the proper supplies and the proper equipment. And we're the ones that make the budget. So I'm going to talk with council staff and see what we can do to make sure that we can kind of beef up this part of the equipment process, because people are saying we have a speeding problem. Us counselors have been saying we've had a speeding problem. The mayor is saying we've had a speeding problem. And just because this is the way it always was done, doesn't mean that we shouldn't start really taking a hard, deep look at that and making significant changes, because I still believe that reducing the speeding problem in Albuquerque will eventually help change the culture to reduce the violent crime in Albuquerque over the long run.
Counselor, and like I said, Counselor, we did take that step, and we should have by October 1st, they're hoping to have the first 100 units installed. And like I said, we're trying to put them into the newer units as they're coming, at least half. We're being very cautious as the cars that are hitting the end of their life because of the cost of installation and everything. We're trying to put those ones off, but I agree that as we go forward, the more of these units that we can install, the better. We'll make a priority with the officers who give the most tickets, like I said, and we'll just continue to grow from there.
Awesome. That would be great. I mean, at least maybe every officer that is in the traffic unit, they should have one. I mean, every officer in the traffic unit should have a LiDAR gun. And if they don't, okay, well, that's good to hear.
Traffic's the exception. They have the tools they need.
Counselor, I would just mention that, you know, when I first was elected to council, I asked APD about the equipment, and they gave me a list of things that I was able to help them with my set aside. So just a side note is that, you know, we're able to purchase some of that equipment for them as well.
And Madam President, I recognize that we can use set aside, but I have streets I need to repair too. I have other issues, and I know all of you do too. When we're talking about a $223 million division, why don't our officers have equipment in their vehicles? I think that we should at least have LiDARs in the older cars and radars in the newer cars until we can, you know, kind of cycle throughout time. So I'm going to put my thumb on that one for our budget time next time around, but I appreciate having some discussion about that. And I don't have any more questions tonight. I'll circle back on the next council meeting for the other questions. Thank you, Chief, for popping on.
Thank you, guys. You guys have a good evening.
Chief and to the administration, Councilor Bassan submitted a number of questions, and I think she and I would both appreciate that you would respond to those questions before our next council meeting.
Madam President, members of council, yes, I will. I just got the questions emailed to me. We will go through them, and we'll make sure council has those answers before the next council meeting.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you for being with us.
Madam President, this is Isaac. I'd like to apologize. I didn't see those questions. Otherwise, I would have forwarded them to APD and to the superintendent. So I apologize to the council for that.
Thank you, Mr. Padilla. Okay, Councilor Bassan, did you have any other? No. Okay, so with that, then, councilors, we will move on to our item number 6, which is the journal. Councilor Gibson.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll move approval for the June 17th journal.
Thank you, Councilor Gibson. Do I have a second? Councilors? No. Councilor Sena, I see your hand up. Thank you. Councilor Davis, thank you. Okay, Councilor Gibson, you have a motion and a second to approve the June 21st, I'm sorry, the June 17th journal. Are there any questions of councilors? I don't see any. So with that, Ms. Ortega, we will turn to you for a roll call vote.
Councilor Bassan.
Yes.
Councilor Benton.
Yes.
Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Councilor Gibson.
Yes.
Councilor Harris.
Yes.
Councilor Jones.
Yes.
Councilor Pena.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilor Sena.
Yes.
Councilor Borrego.
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you, councilors. That motion passes on a 9-0 vote. Councilor Gibson, our next order of business.
I move approval of the June 21st journal.
Thank you, Councilor Gibson. You have a second from Councilor Sena and Councilor Sena. Councilor Bassan. She put it up just as fast as she took it down. Councilor Gibson, did you have a question?
No.
No. Okay. Any other questions from councilors regarding the June 21st journal? I don't see any hands in the queue. We will move to Ms. Ortega.
Councilor Bassan.
Yes.
Councilor Benton.
Yes.
Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Councilor Gibson.
Yes.
Councilor Harris.
Yes.
Councilor Jones.
Distracted, yes.
Thank you. Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego,
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you, counselors. That item passes on a 9-0 vote. Counselor Gibson.
I move approval of the June 25th journal.
Thank you, Counselor Gibson, and Counselor Bassan has a second. So are there any questions from counselors? I don't see any questions, counselors, so we will move to Ms. Ortega. Ms. Ortega.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego,
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. So that item passes on a 9-0 vote. With that, counselors, we will move on to our communications and introductions. Are there any changes to the letter of introduction? I do have one change, counselors, if I may read that. I move that the rules be suspended for the purpose of placing OC 38 on today's agenda for action. OC 38 is the selection of the Director of Council Services. And with this particular item, I need 2/3 of the counselors present to vote. We do have a second from Counselor Sena. Are there any questions, counselors? I don't see any hands raised regarding that issue. So Ms. Ortega, we will move to the vote.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego,
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you, counselors. That item passes on unanimously. And I would just like to congratulate Mr.
Madam President.
Madam President.
Oh, sorry.
If I may, Madam President, this motion was to place it on tonight's agenda. It will come up again later in the meeting under approvals.
Sorry. Yes, I know.
Thank you.
I was getting ahead of myself. So with that, Counselor Gibson.
I move approval of the letter of introduction.
Counselor Gibson, thank you. And with that, do I have a second, counselors? I'm looking at the queue here and I don't see a hand raised. I need to, oh, there they are. Counselor Sena, Counselor Bassan. So with that, are there any questions, counselors? If not, then we will move to the vote. Ms. Ortega.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego,
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you, counselors. With that, we will move on to our deferrals and withdrawals. Counselors, do we have any deferrals or withdrawals at this time? I see Counselor Davis and Counselor Benton, item 050.
Thank you, Madam President. I would move a deferral until August 16th of item 050. 050 is revising the ordinances of the city related to the city's budget.
Thank you, Counselor Davis. Is that also a motion?
Yes, ma'am. I moved deferral until August 16th, I believe.
Can I see a second from Counselor Benton and Counselor Jones as well? Are there any questions, counselors? If not, Ms. Ortega.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego,
Yes.
9-0 on the deferral.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. If you give me just a minute here, I need to write something down. Thank you. Okay. Going back on my script, on my agenda here. Counselor Benton, item R135.
Thank you, Madam President. I move deferral of R135. That's a nuisance substandard dwelling in need of abatement at 1717 Edith Boulevard Southeast.
Thank you, Counselor Benton.
Deferral
Looks like,
August 16th.
okay, so you are moving deferral to August 16th on that item, and you have a second from Counselor Jones. Are there any questions, counselors? I don't see any questions, so Ms. Ortega.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego.
Yes.
9-0 on the deferral to August 16th.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. We will move on to our next item, which is also Counselor Benton, and that is R155. Counselor Benton.
Thank you, Madam President. This is another nuisance substandard dwelling or structure in need of abatement. This one at 1804 High Street Southeast. I move a deferral until August 16th.
Thank you, Counselor Benton. You have a second from Counselor Sena and Counselor Bassan. Any questions, counselors? If not, Ms. Ortega.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego.
Yes.
9-0 on the deferral to August 16th.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. Counselor Benton, you have a number of these deferrals this evening. Counselor Benton, R171.
Thank you, Madam President. R171 concerning the future management of the Candelaria Nature Preserve and approval of the resource management plan. I move a deferral until August 16th.
Thank you, Counselor Benton. It appears you have a second from Counselor Jones and Counselor Bassan. Any questions, counselors? If not, Ms. Ortega.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego.
Yes.
9-0 on the deferral to August 16th.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. So I also have a deferral under final actions. Would I add that here? I don't see it on the script, or should I wait?
No, this would be the appropriate place, Madam President.
Okay, I would like to add a deferral to our next meeting, which I guess is August 18th?
16th.
16th, thank you. Of O-38. And counselors, I had a discussion with the administration today, and they had some questions that I'd like for us to discuss before we bring this back to you. So I think that'll give us enough time. Is that correct? O-38 or?
Madam President.
I'm sorry, it's O-49.
Thank you.
I wrote down the wrong number. Thank you. And that's the capital improvements ordinance amendments. So I'd make that motion. And I see a second from Counselor Sena. Thank you, Counselor Sena. Any discussion, counselors? If not, Ms. Ortega for the vote.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sena, Counselor Borrego.
Yes.
9-0 on the deferral.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. So with that, counselors, we're going to move on to item number 9, which is our consent agenda. And I would ask if there are any changes to the consent agenda, counselors? And I'm just going to read this into the record really quick. For individuals on tonight's consent agenda who are being appointed to serve on a board or commission or who may be watching from home, thank you for your willingness to serve. Councilor Gibson.
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Thank you, Councilor Gibson. Councilor Sena offers a second. Are there any questions, councilors? I don't see any. With that, Ms. Ortega?
Councillor Bassan.
Yes.
Councillor Benton.
Yes.
Councillor Davis.
Yes.
Councillor Gibson.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes.
Councillor Pena.
Yes.
Councillor Sena.
Yes.
Councillor Borrego.
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. Congratulations to any appointees that were on that agenda. Councilors, we will move on with to item 11, which are announcements. And this evening we have Councilor Pena, Sena, Bassan, and Benton. I'm not sure who wants to offer the comment with regard to O2169. Or maybe all of you want to offer a comment.
I don't care. I don't care, Madam President.
Go ahead, Councilor, whoever would like to speak.
I tried to get Councilor Pena to do it. I don't know if she saw. Do you have it ready, Councilor Pena? Go ahead.
You go ahead.
Okay, all right. So with regard to O2169, the Automated Speed Enforcement Ordinance, this bill will be heard by FGO later this month, and a series of public input meetings are scheduled. We will have a Zoom webinar on Thursday, August 5th from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. We will also have 2 in-person meetings on Thursday, August 12th at Central and Unser Library from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. and Tuesday, August 17th at the Palo Duro Senior Center at 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m.
Thank you, councilors. Is there any other councilor who'd like to speak? Councilor Pena?
No, thank you, Madam President. Just look forward to the community input.
Thank you, councilors. Thank you for that work. The next item, then, we will move on to Councilor Bassan. Councilor Bassan?
Thank you, Madam President. There will be a Finance and Government Operations Committee meeting on Monday, August 9th at 3 p.m. via Zoom video conference.
Thank you, Councilor Bassan. Councilor Sena?
There will be a Public Safety Committee meeting on Tuesday, August 10th at 3 p.m. via Zoom video conference.
Thank you, Councilor Sena. Councilor Jones?
Thank you, Madam President. There will be a Land Use Planning and Zoning Committee meeting on Wednesday, August 11th at 3 p.m. via Zoom video conference.
Thank you, Councilor Jones. With that, councilors, if there are no further questions regarding that issue, we will move on to item number 12, which is public hearings. And we have a number of public hearings scheduled this evening. Oh, Councilor Gibson, I'm sorry. I see your
I'm
hand.
sorry to slow us down here. You were just getting started. But I do have one announcement that's really, really important.
Go ahead, Councilor Gibson. You have the floor.
To my district. And I want to mention it because there was so much work that was put into this, the Mile High District and San Pedro corridor applied for and was accepted along with 9 other community economic development projects. And this project was one of 4 that was granted through the Urban Neighborhood Commercial Corridor Initiative. And it reads the San Pedro Corridor Revitalization Plan, Albuquerque San Pedro Main Street Corridor, and the Mile High District. This is a strategic plan development, capacity building, training, and outreach to revitalize San Pedro Corridor. And I just want to congratulate them for their determination and the hard work and the cooperative spirit that actually crosses south across our boundary, the District 7 boundary into District 6, and includes the Fair Heights West neighborhood. And their participation too. So congratulations to everybody who worked on this. I'm thrilled.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Councilor Gibson. That area is much needed improvements. Any other councilors that need or wish to address? I see Councilor Benton. Councilor Benton.
Yeah, I wanted to say all those congratulations and noted hard work and determination all also apply to our colleague, Councilor Gibson, for her work on that corridor over the years.
Thank you, Councilor Benton. Okay, councilors, we will, I don't see any other hands in the queue. So with that, we will move on to our public hearings. We have 4 public hearings this evening, just so that the public knows. And we will start with item number A, AC 21-6. Sycamore Neighborhood Association appeals the zoning hearing examiner's decision. And Mr. Melendres, are we hearing this in conjunction with the next item as well or not?
Madam President, yes, we are. Items A and B are related. AC 21-6 and AC 21-7 have similar sets of facts and apply to the same property. So I'll explain those together and then we'll need a motion with respect to each.
And these are both located in the Sycamore Neighborhood Association area. So go ahead, Mr. Melendres. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Councilors, the specific site at issue here is located at 1203 Cole Avenue Southeast. It's the northeast corner of Cole and Cedar. Applicant came forward to the zoning hearing examiner requesting 4 variances at that particular site. The zoning hearing examiner approved all 4. They include for a height variance, a variance to the buffering requirement, a variance to the rear setback requirement, and a variance to the wall height requirement. The Sycamore Neighborhood Association appealed 2 of those approvals. One is for the rear setback and the other is for the building height. Those came to the land use hearing officer by referral from the city council. The land use hearing officer evaluated those approvals and determined that the zoning hearing examiner should be reversed and that those variances should actually be denied. The test for a variance requires that there be a special circumstance applicable to the property that justifies the variance. In this particular instance, the special circumstances pointed to by the property owner included topography and irregular lot shape and platting issues. However, the zoning hearing examiner identified that the slope on the property was not particularly significant and that it was essentially a square property that didn't have any irregularity to its shape. And therefore the special circumstance, if any, didn't appear to justify a variance of 15 feet to the height or a rear yard variance of 15 feet. Essentially, this property is located adjacent to lower density residential, which triggers the neighborhood edge requirements in the IDO and limits the building height here to 30 feet. They were asking for a variance to that to allow a 15-foot variance to allow a taller building, and also a variance to the rear yard setback that would allow them to place an accessory building all the way up against the rear property line. Because the land use hearing officer found that the special circumstance was not there or did not justify the variances, the land use hearing officer is recommending that these variances be denied and that the zoning hearing examiner be reversed. I can't hear. Can you?
Sorry, I turned it off so I wouldn't have any reverberation. Councilor Benton, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Melendres, with regard to the one aspect, which was the accessory building, maybe somebody here can clarify that, but aren't those allowed within normal setbacks anyway? Or is that only for residential accessory buildings?
Madam President, Councilor Benton, the IDO requirement in this instance would require a hard 15-foot rear yard setback for that zone district, regardless of whether it's accessory, because I am familiar with the standard you're referring to. And if one of us were to do an accessory building at home, you could do it essentially at the lot line, but that wouldn't be the case in this MXM zone.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and move that we accept the LUHO's recommendation and findings.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. You have several seconds. Councillor Bassan, Councillor Davis. Any other questions, councillors? And we're going to take the vote on these one at a time. So Councillor Benton, that move, I guess, is for AC 21-6.
Yes, and I'll have the same motion for 7.
Okay, councillors, do we have any questions? If not, then we will move to Ms. Ortega for the vote. Ms. Ortega?
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson, Counselor Gibson,
Sorry, yes.
thank you. Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
thank you. Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego,
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you, councillors. That item passes on a unanimous vote. We will move on to AC 21-7. Councillor Benton?
Thank you, Madam President. I move to accept the LUHO's recommendation and findings.
Thank you. I have a second from Councillor Bassan. Any questions from other councillors? Councillor Gibson?
Thank you, Madam President. I don't really have a question, but just wanted to make a statement about this. On this particular lot, because the neighborhood edge applies here, they're prohibited from getting or it was been found that they needed to have their building under 30 feet without this variance. And it seems to me, and I remember talking about this when we voted on it, whenever that was, year 2, 3 years ago, whenever it was. However, now I can see where this really might have the opposite effect of some neighbors on some neighborhoods, because if they are unable to build what they had intended for this was an office building with some residential in it, it just might not be economically feasible for them to build something under 30 feet, for example. And that could very possibly, and over time probably, cause disinvestment, and which again have just the opposite effect that is intended for the ordinances that we've passed for zoning. Anyway, I just want to make that statement. I voting for it, voting for the motion, but I do so with feeling bad about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Any other comments, councillors? Councillor Benton?
Thank you, Madam President. And I do sympathize with Councillor Gibson's statement and with the applicant, because it's an unusual mixed use project. There's good things about it, but on these kind of calls, we've got to go by the book, and this might be something we really want to talk about when we do the community planning area assessment for this area, whenever that occurs. I'm sorry to report that that process is being delayed, but or at least the administration is proposing to delay that process. But that's why we need annual updates. Some people complain that we have annual updates, but that's why we need them to sometimes deal with these kind of one-off good projects that just don't fit within the zoning regulations. So thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Councilor Benton. Councilor Basanya, your hand is still up. Do you have a question? Or is
Yes.
that from
Yes,
previous?
ma'am, I have a comment.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to make sure to be clear for the public that's watching. I think that it's easy to see on such important issues like this where it's an appeal. People probably are watching saying, what the heck, how come they're going through this so fast? And they're not really giving any regard to it. But I think that it's very important to just say every once in a while that we have complete packets that are given to us that we, at least I know I thoroughly review them. This last weekend I spent reviewing them and then we got briefed on it. I just want to make sure that for the public watching, they know that we're not just doing these votes on a whimsy, that we do invest time in this as a council and we do review this and give it real consideration. But because of the quasi-judicial process, it might appear that we're not really giving it the attention that some may want. We're just doing it on our own time, alone, so that we can create this proper atmosphere in which to vote.
Thank you for clarifying that, Councilor Bassan. I know that we also have the opportunity to discuss any issue related to our questions with our legal counsel prior to our meeting. So that's a very good point. So with that, I will ask if there are any other comments from councilors regarding this item before we vote. I don't see any other hands in the queue. So with that, we will turn to Ms. Ortega.
Councillor Bassan.
Yes.
Councillor Benton.
Yes.
Councillor Davis.
Yes.
Councillor Gibson.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes.
Councillor Pena.
Yes.
Councillor Sena.
Yes.
Councillor Borrego.
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you, councilors. That item passes on a 9-0 vote. So we will move on to item number C, which is AC 21-8. And Mr. Melendres, I will let you explain this appeal.
Thank you, Madam President. Councilors, AC 21-8 is an appeal of the Landmarks Commission approval of a certificate of appropriateness. The Landmarks Commission approved that certificate, but required certain modifications to as-built changes that occurred to a contributing structure in the Huning Highland Historic Overlay District. Essentially, some of the finishes on the property had been updated. Some windows had been changed out, a set of steps had been changed, and some finishes and features on the front porch had been changed. The city planning department received notice of those changes, and outreach was done by the Code Enforcement Division, who put the property owner in contact with historic preservation planning staff at the city. The historic preservation planning staff processed those changes through the Landmarks Commission to review them for appropriateness. The Landmarks Commission determined that although some of the finishes and changes weren't exactly consistent, that aesthetically they were not significant enough to change at this point, given the cost that might be involved with that, and ultimately approved the changes with some exceptions, including that certain windows be returned to their historic character. Right now, the house has vinyl windows on it, and that is not consistent with the historic character pursuant to the IDO and the Landmarks Commission. The Landmarks Commission also recommended and required, as part of its approval, that finishes on the front porch be restored to their historic features to be more consistent with the neighborhood. The Landmarks Commission determined that historic appearance of the front porch was the most significant contributing factor of the house. The property owner appealed that decision of the Landmarks Commission, largely in objection to the requirements of updating the porch, changing out the windows, etc. The land use hearing officer reviewed that and determined that the Landmarks Commission's decision should be affirmed, and that the certificate of appropriateness for the overall changes should be approved subject to the conditions of the Landmarks Commission that would require some changes to make it more consistent with its traditional historic character. As with the last appeal, you won't hear from the parties tonight. You're considering only whether to accept or reject the recommendation of your land use hearing officer. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer those. And if you have additional questions beyond that, this can be scheduled for a full hearing at a later time.
Is there, Counselor Gibson, do you have a question?
No, I'd just like to make the motion to accept LUHO recommendations and findings.
Thank you, Counselor Gibson. I'll second that. Are there any other questions of counselors?
Madam President, if I may.
Yes, Counselor Benton.
I would like to ask if the Counselor Gibson and whoever seconded that would be willing to add one provision to the motion. And this, as I understand it, the Landmarks Commission okayed or staff did the replacement of only the front-facing windows on the building. So they had already approved for part of the building in deference to the owner's mistake or what it's going to cost to correct the mistake. We're going to allow the owner to keep the vinyl windows on the sides that do not face the public right of way. And I think the what I wanted to add, if it's all right, would be to require that all of the windows facing both Arno and LED to be replaced to substantially match the design configuration and muntins of the original windows that were removed by the appellants.
Counselor Gibson, go ahead.
I'm fine with that. As I recall, though, that they put up a 6-foot fence, but I do remember somewhere where that window or windows, I think there's just one window, was still visible. Is that correct?
I think Mr. Melendez could answer that, but yeah, the original complaint from another neighbor was the wall that was built that was not compliant, and so there was a lot of back and forth in the record. But this front porch was a big deal that be restored to its historic appearance, and then Mr. Melendez, help me out on that. What was the replacement of the front windows part of the LUHO's recommendation?
Madam President, Councilor Benton, yes, and there was significant discussion, I would say, as part of the appeal about which windows specifically the Landmarks Commission was requiring be replaced. And the LUHO did some work to identify, to evaluate a couple of different statements by the Landmarks Commission and the facts, and ultimately is proposing to supplement the Landmarks Commission's findings and recommendations with a restatement of this one in particular, as well as some others. But with respect to the windows, the LUHO statement is that because the front facade of the dwelling is the most significant defining characteristic of the dwelling, only the 3 front-facing windows shall be replaced. And so with your amendment, those 3 front-facing windows are designed, sort of integrated into the porch in the way that the house faces Arno. And with your amendment to that, the amendment would be to the LUHO's finding and recommendation number 6 on page 22 to essentially replace the language limiting that requirement to only the 3 front, to say that all of those windows facing both Arno and LED shall be replaced to substantially match. And that would include 2 additional windows that face LED.
Thank you.
So if I may.
Counselor Gibson, yeah, go ahead, please.
So then would I need to change the motion to accept recommendations and adopt different findings, or can we do it with just the amending the first motion?
Madam President, Councilor Gibson, it would simply be an amendment to your motion that you're accepting the LUHO recommendation and findings, except that LUHO's finding number 6 is amended so that the requirement to replace windows would apply to all street-facing windows and not just those 3 facing Arno.
Okay, all right, that's fine with me.
And I would accept that as well, Councilor Gibson. So we have a motion and an amended motion in a second. Councilor Bassan?
Thank you, Madam President. I want to make sure to say that I think this property looks beautiful. I think that what the new property owner or what they've done looks fabulous, but that's not what we're here to discuss. And I think that that's another important differentiation to make clear to the public is with historical monuments, with historical buildings that we have, they're part of something that's overseen by the Landmarks Commission. And I imagine with the purchase of any of these properties, it's made very clear that there's certain rules and boundaries and expectations for that building. And we can't just have a complete disregard for those rules. And although I think it looks great, I also appreciate some of the historical need to truly preserve that character. So I know that it pains me with my construction background to imagine the cost that will be endured to make these changes, but we have to follow rules. That's why they're there. And that's why there's variances, and that's why we have the process we do. And if we start making too many exceptions, then where will we end up? And I don't really want to see that. So I am going to support the motion that is being presented, even though I know that it is probably going to be a very painful reality for the homeowner.
Thank you, Councilor Bassan. Councilor Pena?
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Melendez, can we actually vote on them as 2 separate issues? I mean, what we have in front of us is what's been, discussed over at DRB, and they've, made some recommendations that we have before us. And then we have kind of an amendment from Councilor Benton to add the additional ones. Can we vote on those separate, the amendment and then the original consideration?
Madam President, Councilor Pena, I don't think it would be appropriate to take those up separately. The one issue that you have before you is how to dispose of the appeal. The LUHO has made a recommendation on how that appeal should be disposed of. However, the City Council is the final decision maker with respect to that. It's not a bill in the sense that you can move to amend the bill and then vote on the final bill. Your task is to either accept or reject the LUHO's recommendation, and you can do that as the LUHO submitted it, or you can make amendments to the findings or recommendations of the LUHO as part of your vote, but it's one vote for that.
Madam President, so just based on the added amendment, I can't support it, but I do support it as it came down from DRB.
Thank you, Councilor Pena. So just for clarification purposes, Mr. Melendez, the vote that that is on the floor is to accept the LUHO's recommendations and findings. However, we're amending one of the findings to include all the windows rather than just the front windows. Is that correct?
Madam President, not all of the windows, because there's 4 sides of the dwelling. 2 sides of that dwelling face the street, and so only the windows that face the street would be part of this. And I will say the Landmarks Commission, for additional clarification, the Landmarks Commission did include language in their final decision suggesting that all of the windows should be replaced to the extent feasible. I may be paraphrasing there, but that was essentially part of the language that came down from the Landmarks Commission. There was additional language about replacing only those windows facing Arno, And that was one of the tasks that the land use hearing officer had on his plate, was reconciling those two. And so I think that by requiring all of the windows to be replaced on both street fronts, that is also consistent with the thinking of the Landmarks Commission based on some of the statements that they issued in their notice.
Okay, so just for clarification, Mr. Melendres, then we're saying all of the windows that are facing the street fronts, correct?
Madam President, that is correct. And those two street fronts are Arno and Lead.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that's very, very clear in the record, so that when we do take the vote, we know as we move forward, and so that the landowner knows what we're voting on. Okay, with that, Councilor Bassan, did you have another question?
I'm sorry, Madam President, but one point of clarification for this, because I've never gone to something where we potentially accept LUHO recommendations and adopt different findings. That's something totally different than I know the motion, I understand, and I've heard that it's adopt the findings with an amendment, but that's not one of the three options that I'm familiar with here. So how do we have findings with an amendment versus adopt different findings? Is that if we were to change it all up, or if you can just, I guess, clarify on how that differs?
Sure, thank you, Madam President. One point of clarification is that I think with respect to the window standard, you're actually imposing a requirement more than a finding. So the Landmarks Commission did issue conditions with respect to their approval. And so this effectively clarifies or amends one of their conditions to require those certain windows. It's a little bit different than maybe just a mere finding that is a conclusion, based on facts in the record. But with respect to Councilor Bassan's specific inquiry, you are the final decision maker in these appeals. The City Council is, and the land use hearing officer makes a recommendation. And so long, at this particular hearing, the disposition that you make of this matter, so long as it is supported by the record and consistent with the standard that you're reviewing, you have leave to completely change the land use hearing officer's findings or to amend them. And that's what's happening in this case. And so I recognize it's not common, but it is not unprecedented.
Thank you. That was helpful, Mr. Melendres.
Thank you, Councilor Bassan, for asking the question. Any other questions, councilors? I have a motion and a second as amendment. Councilor Pena.
Thank you, Madam President. Although it is in some of the recommendations from the landmark folks, are there other recommendations? I guess, so my point is that a counselor, and this isn't anything in regards to Councilor Benton, I'm just trying to understand it, but so a counselor can add to what was sent down from the DRB. So what, rather than as a body, right? So it's like, all the work, and as Councilor Bassan said, we read this information over the weekend. So we're considering our vote based on what we have in front of us. And then a counselor changes really pretty substantially what was in front of us. And then we have to vote on it all together. I'm just for clarification. It just seems like an interesting, it just seems like there should be, if we're going to add, it seems like we should have some kind of process to add.
May I make a point of order here with this discussion, Madam President?
Councilor Benton, go ahead.
Yeah, I asked permission from the makers of the motion and the seconder of the motion to amend their motion. And what that amendment wasn't some whim of mine. It came from the original hearing by the Landmarks Commission, who puts the most work into all of this, more than even the LUHO, I would suggest. And so this is totally in order. And as Mr. Melendres just stated, this is one of the three options that is standard language laid out for us before us when there's been a recommendation from the LUHO. And this is one of them that we may amend the language. So all I did was bring back a small part of the Landmarks Commission language. I think they were very generous with the property owner, by the way. If you look at the record, the property owner was not required to use the type of siding that normally would have been recommended. They're allowing him to keep that on. And I think they made other accommodations as well, if I remember correctly in the record. So there's nothing untoward or anything out of place with what is before us right now.
Madam President, if I may as well, too, just for purposes of clarification, the DRB didn't have any involvement with this particular matter. It was exclusively for the Landmarks Commission, so that's the only board whose decision we're considering. And I think it's not common that the type of motion that that the council is considering be made. It's not particularly common. However, I think it is understandable in this particular instance. And if you'll indulge me for just 1 second, I'll tell you why. Because the Landmarks Commission made two statements. The first was that existing replacement windows do not meet design guidelines as far as material or mutton configuration. It is allowable to have these windows on facades not visible from the public right-of-way. However, the 3 windows facing Arno Street need to be replaced with metal-clad windows with the 4 glass divides at the top. This needs to be completed within the next 12 months. That was a finding of the Landmarks Commission. The Landmarks Commission went on to make a recommendation that says that all windows shall be replaced with metal-clad windows of the same dimension and operation as original, with the 4 glass divides at the top were previously presented. So the LUHO was trying to sort of glean a single understanding out of those 2 statements. The one statement is only the front 3, the other statement was all. And so I think it's understandable that the council also has discretion to wade in that interpretation of what the intent of Landmarks was with respect to that. The LUHO has recommended that he thinks that Landmarks really only intended for the 3 on Arno, but I think it's completely within reason to conclude that the Landmarks believed that at least the windows facing the frontage should be replaced, because that also is consistent with the statement. So that is, the council does have that discretion to substitute its judgment for the LUHO, even if on a very limited question like that.
Thank you, Mr. Melendres, for clarifying that. I think it's important to note that when you purchase a historic property and there are requirements to meet state or local eligibility for historic preservation and that designation, that it's important to note that when you make those changes, you're trying to keep the same appearance, or at least the same character that you find, when you purchase that property. And so I think that the findings are highly appropriate in the fact that, we could have changed all of the windows out, but we are only changing a portion of them. And I think it's still highly appropriate that when purchasing properties in those particular areas, you kind of know what you're getting into. Councilor Jones?
Thank you, Madam President. I would ask, please, that Mr. Melendres read the motion or repeat the motion on which we are voting right now, so there's no confusion about what we're voting on.
Madam President, Councilor Jones, I'd be happy to do that. Let me just pull up my notes. So the motion on the floor is to accept the LUHO recommendation and findings with an amendment to the LUHO's recommendation / condition number 6, such that all of the windows facing Arno in lead need to be replaced to substantially match in design, configuration, and mutton of the original windows that appellants removed and replaced. And that is in place of the requirement that only 3 windows be replaced. So instead of just the 3, it'll be all facing Arno in lead, and that's the motion.
Thank you.
With that, councilors, I don't see any additional hands up in the queue. So we will turn to Ms. Ortega for the vote.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Davis. Counselor Davis.
Counselor Davis, can you unmute yourself? Thank you.
I'm trying this stupid city computer. Lowest bidder. Yes.
Thank you. Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
No.
Counselor Sena,
Yeah.
Counselor Borrego.
Yes.
Motion passes on an 8-1 vote.
Thank you, counselors. That motion passes on an 8-1. So we will move on to our next appeal. And that is item number D, which is AC 2110. Mr. Melendres, would you please explain this appeal?
Thank you, Madam President and councilors. AC 2110 is an appeal of a variance that was approved by the zoning hearing examiner. The subject site in this particular one is at 2311 Hollywood Avenue Northwest. The property owner at that location requested a variance to the front and rear yard setbacks. Those general setback requirements are 10 feet front and 10 feet back. The zoning hearing examiner approved a variance of 5 feet to each, such that the setback requirement at this particular location would be 5 feet in the back and 5 feet in the front. A neighboring property owner appealed that decision to the city council. It was referred to the land use hearing officer. The neighbor's appeal was limited only to the front yard setback, did not appeal the approval of the rear yard setback. The property owner argues that the variance will increase congestion on the block light and airflow from their home, and permit visibility into homes across the street. Hollywood Avenue is a very narrow street. The record indicates that it's only between 13 and 15 feet wide, which is extremely narrow for city street standards. The zoning hearing examiner approved these variances after determining that the lot was uniquely small. The lot is about 3,100 square feet in area, and for example, the R1A minimum lot size, this site is zoned R1A, the minimum lot size in that zone district is 3,500 square feet, so it is technically non-conforming with respect to even the minimum lot size. That decision was appealed to the land use hearing officer. The land use hearing officer is recommending that the ZHE be affirmed based on the uniqueness of the small lot size, and that constituting a special circumstance applicable to the property that creates a substantial burden to development of that property. The city council, again, is not going to hear from the parties tonight. You're considering whether to accept or reject the land use hearing officer's recommendation. If you have questions, I'll do my best to answer only from the record.
Counselor Benton?
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Melendres, in the record, there was a special circumstance that was cited by the applicant for the variance, and my understanding is also that a site plan was submitted, but not a site plan with the position of the structure on it. Is that correct?
Madam President, Councilor Benton, yes. So the record has a survey of the property and a floor plan of what is described as a single family first floor plan of approximately 11 to 1,200 square feet, but it does not depict a site plan how that would sit on that lot.
There was one other question that I have, which I think that this appeal and the application have very much to do with context of that street, which is, as you stated, is a very narrow street. It's a little Old Town lane that goes west from the center of Old Town off of Rio Grande, and it is really really unusual. And I believe from looking at the map, the lots on the south side of the street are deeper and allow more flexibility for their use. There are not many empty lots left, but they're different configuration than all of the lots on the north side are very shallow. In other words, they're only 40 feet deep, I believe, which makes it hard to fit a structure on there. I would like the ZHE to look at this again. I would like to move for a remand to the ZHE and ask that the ZHE evaluate and make a finding as to whether or not the special circumstances proposed apply generally to the other property in the same zone district and vicinity, and require that a site plan be submitted as part of the request that depicts the structure on the lot. And last and not least, certainly evaluate the applicability of the contextual standards of the IDO to this property. And those contextual standards are found in section 14-16-5-1-C 2C of the IDO, and look at that, and that the ZHE look at this with those specific issues in mind.
Councillor Benton, I would like to second that motion.
Thank you.
Are there any questions, councillors? We have a motion for, I guess, is that a motion for a deferral? Or
It's a motion for
a
remand.
A remand with some direction. So we have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions? Councillor Davis? No.
Let's just offer a second.
Okay. Okay, with that, then we will go to Ms. Ortega for the vote.
Councillor Bassan,
Yes.
Councillor Benton,
Yes.
Councillor Davis,
Yes.
Councillor Gibson,
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Jones,
Yes.
Councillor Pena.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Sena,
Yes.
Councillor Borrego,
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. That concludes our public hearings, and we will move on to item number, let's see, number 13, councilors. This is approvals, and this is 038, selection of the Director of Council Services. I move confirmation of Chris Melendres for our director. We need 2/3 of the vote of councilors for this particular item. I see Councillor Sena's hand for a second. Are there any questions? I don't see any questions from any of our councilors. So Ms. Ortega, we'll move on to a vote.
Councillor Bassan,
Yes.
Councillor Benton,
Yes.
Councillor Davis,
Yes.
Councillor Gibson,
Yes.
Councillor Harris,
Yes.
Councillor Jones,
Yes.
Councillor Pena,
Yes.
Councillor Sena,
Yes.
Councillor Borrego.
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you, councilors. I just want to congratulate Mr. Melendres for being our new Director of Council Services. And I also would like to thank the councilors who worked with me on the selection committee for working together and devoting our time in person to come to this conclusion. So, Mr. Melendres, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Thank you, Madam President. It's been nothing short of an honor to serve the City Council for the past 8.5 years in various capacities, not the least of which has been the legal capacity for the council. You have an amazing staff, which I'm happy to continue to work with. And I know that this council is committed to the betterment of this city, and I'm passionate to help you accomplish those goals. And I thank you for your trust, and I look forward to, I would say, getting to work, but since I've been your acting director, I'll say continuing work in this seat.
Thank you, Mr. Melendres. Any councilors? like to say anything? Doesn't appear so. I almost called you Counselor Melendres. We look forward to working with you, continuing that work. Counselors, would you like to take a break for a little while and come back, or would you like to just go through? And I see Counselor Jones shaking her head no. Looks like Counselor Davis wants to continue. I'm happy to continue, but I just thought I'd ask the council. Okay, counselors, we will move on to final actions. And our first order of business, we have deferred item A. Let's see, item C, which is 067. Counselor Davis, Senna, Pena, and Benton. Who would like to present this?
Madam President, if I may confer very briefly with my co-sponsors, I think there's some additional issues that need to be worked out here with the administration, and I know we've been having meetings with them today, just some technical language. Councilor Sen has been our lead sponsor here, but I would ask her if she would be okay with a easy deferral for 2 weeks and do a final action on the 16th. I see her nodding her head, and if Councilor Benton would agree or doesn't object, he's nodding, then I would make that motion to defer until August 16th.
And Councilor Pena? Would you concur with that, Councilor Pena?
Yes.
Okay, then we have a motion, Councilor Davis, and I need a second. I see Councilor Benton offering a second. So without further ado, we'll move on to Ms. Ortega for the vote.
Madam President, if I could just briefly, just to get this in before we vote and move on this, I appreciate the support for a deferral. I would hope that we can get a presentation either before the next meeting or at the next meeting, that a presentation be prepared by the administration as to exactly how they see us proceeding with this program, specifically with regard to transit safety and that evaluation. Some of the challenges that were raised in Tom Minicucci's staff report, that they address those as how they see those challenges going forward. Still a strong supporter of us doing this pilot, but I think we really want to ensure everyone's safety in the community, and we want to promote our transit system, especially for people who are transit dependent. All the more need for a sense of security when they're riding the bus or waiting for the bus. So I'll just add that as a request to the administration prior to us hearing this in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Councilor Benton. As one of the sponsors, I appreciate your, I see you're not one of the sponsors. I thought you were one of the sponsors. I appreciate your direction though, and I guess the sponsors would agree to that.
Councilor Benton is one of the
Yes,
sponsors.
he is a
Sorry,
sponsor.
Madam President.
I have only 3 listed here. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm reading the next one. Councilor Benton, I thought you were one of the sponsors. It was confusing to me on that one. Thank you for that direction. I appreciate that very much. Okay, so with that, then I guess we will move on to Ms. Ortega.
Councillor Bassan.
Yes.
Councillor Benton.
Yes.
Councillor Davis.
Yes.
Councillor Gibson.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes.
Councillor Pena.
Yes.
Councillor Senna.
Yes.
Councillor Borrego.
Yes.
9-0 on the deferral for 067 to August 16th.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. You always do such a great job. And I guess I need to start wearing my glasses a little more, counselors, because I'm reading some very tiny print here. I was reading the next item, which is, let's see, it's item E, and it is, I apologize for the noise. That was one of our mufflers going by. Did you hear that? So item E is R178, and that is Counselor Sena, Pena, and Davis, and not Counselor.
Madam President, I think we need to go back to item D, which would be R173. And if I could, I think this one and the last
See,
one.
that's why I said I think I need my glasses. Let me take a look at this. Hold on a second, please. Thank you, Counselor. Okay, so I was getting, okay, Counselor Davis, Sena, Pena, and Benton R173.
Madam President, these all go together, so we'll make the same motion. I would request a deferral until August 16th.
Second.
I guess that was a second from Counselor Gibson or Counselor Jones?
Both.
Or both? Thank you. Any questions or comments, counselors? I don't see any. We will go on to Ms. Ortega. Ms. Ortega.
Counselor Bassan.
Yes.
Counselor Benton.
Yes.
Counselor Davis.
Yes.
Counselor Gibson.
Oops. Yes.
Thank you. Counselor Harris. Counselor Harris. Counselor Harris.
Counselor Harris, there you're.
I said yes.
Thank you. Counselor Jones.
Yes.
Counselor Pena.
Yes.
Counselor Sena.
Yes.
Counselor Borrego.
Yes.
9-0 on the deferral.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. Now, counselors, we will move on to R178. Counselor Sena, Pena, and Davis.
Zero.
Thank you, counselors. We will move on to item I, which is Counselor Harris and Counselor Bassan, R160. Counselor Bassan, or Counselor Harris, would one of you like to discuss this?
I'd like Councilor Bassan, because I want her to take over the task force as I'm stepping away, and I'd like her to drive the bus from now on. So take it away, Councilor.
Thank you, Counselor. Thank you, Madam President. That was probably an unintentional bus joke, sort of, but good job. R160 is accepting the recommendations of the Balloon Landing Task Force, and I would like to move a do pass.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm happy to give a summary of this, but I also know that Paul Smith is here, and he is someone that has been very in tune and full of the process on the task force. So I wouldn't mind if he would be willing to give us an update first and a summary of what his knowledge is before we go further.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
I don't see you on, there you are. Hello, how are you?
Okay.
Very nice to see you.
Thank you. Council President Borrego, members of the council, I'm happy to talk about this. I'd like to first thank Councilor Harris for bringing this issue back to the forefront, and then also to thank Councilor Bassan for taking over his mantle on this. Landing sites is something that's near and dear to all balloonists, and as the city progresses and grows and develops, it's becoming more and more difficult to fly from Balloon Fiesta Park. The task force looked at several different options on how to move forward with, try to preserve the viability of Balloon Fiesta Park for the Balloon Fiesta into the future. There are several items. We looked at rehabbing or retrofitting old properties, trying to buy new properties, trying to find one large property that could serve as a landing spot for the balloons during Balloon Fiesta and also throughout the rest of the year, hopefully. And basically that is the recommendation of the, well, there are several recommendations of the task force. And of course, the big question is always going to be how to fund it. There were some recommendations from the task force before we had to quit meeting because of COVID reasons. And but I would urge you to pass the recommendation or accept the recommendations of the task force, and then we can go on to the next job of trying to find funding.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Are there any questions of Mr. Smith from the counselors? I don't see any questions. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Be well. We will move back to Councillor Bassan.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Smith, for being here and giving that update. I think that it's really important to make sure, and this is something that I've had several constituents reach out about, and along with what Mr. Smith has indicated, we're not saying we are buying anything right now. We're not saying that we're buying anything in the next year. This task force has come up and spent a lot of time coming up with several ideas that range from community coordination and cooperation on private lands. Should people want to get involved and say that they're willing to have a balloon land on their property, if it's a safe area, they can put white sheets out in the shape of an X. All the way, I mean, ranging from something as simple as that to even coming up with an idea of maybe an app where we can have pilots come in and be able to look on an app of where is a safe place to land in the area that they're at, that's been approved by the owner. And then we can go all the way to the extreme, because there's other things in between of modifying parking lots or buying medium properties, or, you know, thinking that way, all the way to the $70 million idea of buying a large piece of property and changing it up so that it can be utilized for landing sites along with other options in the city. I think that it's really important to take this task force opinion and come out saying, okay, these are people that are experienced. These are people who really want to help Albuquerque out. But also we have to find ways to allow Balloon Fiesta to continue thriving while not just continue limiting it. So I want everyone out in the public to know this is not us saying we're using all of this money and we're going out tomorrow to buy the property, but we're coming up with ideas. We're thinking it so that we can make our next move on how best to move forward with this. And that's why we're asking for the recommendations from the Balloon Task Force, the Balloon Landing Task Force, to be approved by the council tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Bassan. Any questions of Councillor Bassan? I do have a comment, and I see that Mr. Smith is still online, and I know that since I worked on the task force prior to Councillor Bassan, I just want to make sure that we are looking at the Northwest Mesa as well. And I'm sure other councillors have, comments regarding their particular areas of town as well. And I see those balloons over my house almost on a daily basis, even not during Balloon Fiesta. So I would like for us to continue to look at other areas of the city, Mr. Smith, and encourage the task force to look at that as well. Okay, with that, councilors, if we have no other comments, which I don't see any, we will move on to the vote. Ms. Ortega?
Councillor Bassan?
Yes.
Councillor Benton?
Yes.
Councillor Davis?
Yes.
Councillor Gibson?
Yes.
Councillor Harris?
Yes.
Councillor Jones?
Yes.
Councillor Pena?
Yes.
Councillor Sena?
Yes.
Councillor Borrego?
Yes.
Passes 9-0.
Thank you, councilors. That passes unanimously. And congratulations, Councillor Bassan and Councillor Harris. We will move on to item J. And I'm seeing a little more clearly now. Councillor Pena, R163.
Thank you, Madam President. R163 is declaring the City Council support of the Route 66 Centennial Celebration in 2026 and directing the Arts and Cultural Services Department to begin the planning process for a Centennial Celebration event in the city of Albuquerque. I move a do pass. And just to be brief, this is the accompanying legislation to the budget. As you know, we appropriated $300,000 to put together a celebration. It's going to be, it'll be the 100th year of the route, and we happen to have the only part of the route that intersects itself with the old Camino Real, and then obviously the historic Route the historic Central Route 66, which is the longest urban stretch of the corridor. And, you know, I look forward to, I would say, celebrations leading up to, and obviously the celebration itself. So I urge everyone's support.
Thank you, Councilor Pena. And it appears that Councilor Sena has offered a second, and I have as well. I would just like to mention that there are 6 councilors that their districts touch Central Avenue. So I think it's really important that we know that we have a majority of the council that is in some way related to Central Avenue or Route 66. So do we have any comments from any of the councilors? I don't see anyone with their hand up. So with that, we will go to Ms. Ortega for the vote. Ms. Ortega?
Councilor
Madam
Bassan?
President, if you don't mind, if I can just close real quick.
Yes, Councilor, go ahead.
I just urge everyone's support. I won't belabor this. I just wanted to say that other councilors abut the historic Route 66. I think Councilor Bassan too with the old Camino Real, and so does other councilors. So, and I don't know if you do or don't, but I know that Councilor Bassan does as well. So thank you. Urge your support.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Pena. Ms. Ortega?
Councilor Bassan?
Yes.
Councilor Benton?
Yes.
Councilor Davis?
Yes.
Councilor Gibson?
Yes.
Councilor Harris?
Yes.
Councilor Jones?
Yes.
Councilor Pena?
Yes.
Councilor Sena?
Yes.
Councilor Borrego?
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. So we will move on to item L. Councilor Davis and Councilor Benton are 179. Would one of you care to discuss this?
I'll move a due pass for the purpose of discussion.
Councilor Benton, thank you. And we have a second from Councilor Davis, Councilor Harris, Councilor Bassan. Thank you all.
And Madam President, I think Councilor Davis can speak to this as well, but there's some questions that we had the last time this bill came up. There still seem to be lingering, and I'm going to move a deferral and request that the amendment that we had requested, and Councilor Davis can elaborate on this, but a specific amendment be prepared during a 2-week deferral.
Thank you, Councilor Benton. So you have a deferral, and I have a second from Councilor Davis. Could you just clarify what you were intending with that?
I'll speak to it. It just has to do with possible negotiations outside of the boundaries of this TID that we understand have occurred and have concerns about. But I'll also defer to Councilor Davis to comment on that as well.
Councilor Davis?
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, I appreciate that, Councilor Benton. And maybe if I could just ask the administration very briefly, Madam President, it would help us get on track, and then we can move this for 2 more weeks if they'd be amenable to it. If the administration, I don't know if Ms. Nair is available at the mayor's conference room.
Yes, I'm here.
Ms. Nair, thanks for joining us, and thank you. I know you were part of the last minute discussions here. I think there's just been some concerns raised, as Councilor Benton mentioned, that there were some other conversations being had or other negotiations being had with UNM related to unrelated activities. And we at the council had proposed an amendment that be included that would just ensure that the TID was focused only on those sort of on-site activities or off-sites related on-site. And I don't know, do we know why that wasn't included in the administration's recommendations and in those discussions over the last month or so?
So the administration was prepared to move forward with the TID
in June. So, we were not holding it up for any ancillary discussions. When we have an occasion to meet with the president and various high-level staff members, we often discuss multiple topics, but again, we were prepared to move forward with the TID as presented in June.
Thank you, Ms. Nair. And so, Mr. Melendrez, if you can just help us remember, and I know in your role as our director and our past with legal counsel, you've helped us with this, but I think we just want to keep these negotiations on track and be sure we can address that outstanding language that I think is left on the table, so that we can get this to the Board of Finance and to the legislature and bring this thing to reality. So, Madam President, thank you. That's my time, but I would support the deferral for 2 weeks.
Thank you, Councilor Davis. Are there any other comments from any other councilors? I don't see any. With that, then we will move to Ms. Ortega for the vote.
Councilor Bassan,
Yes.
Councilor Benton,
Yes.
Councilor Davis,
Yes.
Councilor Gibson.
It was defer night.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilor Harris. Councilor Harris. Councilor Jones,
Yes.
Councilor Pena,
Yes.
Councilor Sena,
Yes.
Councilor Borrego.
Yes.
8-0 on the deferral to August 16th.
Thank you, councilors. And I would just to remind people to mute themselves if you're not speaking. So we will move on to item M. Councilor Pena, R181, establishing our federal priorities. Councilor Pena.
Thank you, Madam President. I see that we have Tom on the call now. So R181, establishing federal priorities for the city of Albuquerque for 2021 to the community project program funds of the 117th Congress of the United States. I move a do pass, and then I also have an amendment. So before I ask Tom to speak, I think we can go ahead and
I will second that vote. And thank you also, Councilor Bassan, for the second.
So then I have floor amendment, which would be number 1, Madam President, which is strike the attached tables to the resolution R21-181 and insert in lieu of the tables attached to this amendment. And then the explanation for this is it separates the projects submittal to the House of Representatives infrastructure bill into a separate table from the remaining projects assigned to the House of Representatives appropriation bill. This provides an improved presentation format for presenting these bills to the members of Congress and the delegation and staff members and to federal agencies. So with that, I would move the amendment.
Thank you, Councilor Pena. And you have a second from Councilor Sena. Are there any questions related to amendment number 1? Councilors? I don't see any questions. So with that, we will move to Ms. Ortega for the vote on amendment number 1.
Councilor Bassan.
Yes.
Councilor Benton,
Yes.
Councilor Davis,
Yes.
Councilor Gibson,
Yes.
Councilor Harris,
Yes.
Councilor Jones,
Yes.
Councilor Pena,
Yes.
Councilor Sena,
Yes.
Councilor Borrego.
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you, councilors. Amendment number 1 passes on a 9-0 vote. Councilor Pena.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. I think I'll go ahead and let Tom explain the bill, and then I will close.
Thank you, Councilor Pena. Mr. Manacucci. Good evening.
Madam President, good evening. Madam President, members of the council. Primarily what it is our ordinance requires that any priorities we submit to federal government, that we need to adopt them by resolution. In 2020, we did adopt a resolution for 2021. However, soon after we adopted it, Congress brought back, after I think 10 or 12 years, their earmark program, which is their equivalent of state capital outlay on this. And so at that point in time, a number of members of council staff, a number of people on the 11th floor, and I'd say, at least 9 or 10 people throughout the departments, I think worked fairly hard throughout the 3 or 4 month period to go ahead and I try to identify from Congress exactly what they were requesting as Congress kind of developed on the fly their program of what their earmark program. It is a different program than previous years. The previous years they had to suspend it because of a lot of issues, I guess, primarily with misappropriations of it. So they had put a number of new rules on it. And as they adopt, which are somewhat equivalent to the rules they have for grants. So as they adopted these programs, we had to kind of figure out which of our priorities the city could offer, which needs the city had could fit into these programs. That was determined. We then oftentimes at the last minute had to fill out applications as their final rules were set. But overall, the city submitted $30 million worth of requests, and the New Mexico delegation went ahead and forwarded $17 million worth for funding consideration by the whole Congress. Doesn't mean that's necessarily what we will get, but it is for consideration in the bills. We probably would have received more, except because we did not have a representative in the House at the time that they passed their version of the infrastructure bill. We were unable to have a couple of our road projects and trails projects put into the infrastructure bill. But of course, there will always be next year. And so primarily tonight, we just we go ahead and we adopt that list. The list of projects is in the table I think is also in your write-up. There's a list of projects that were submitted and that were funded or moved forward by our congressional delegation.
Thank you, Mr. Menicucci. Are there any questions? Councilor Senna.
Not a question, Madam President, just a comment to really thank John O'Donnell and Mr. Menicucci and all of the IGR committee for their diligent work on this. I think that, as Mr. Menicucci had mentioned, we were really powering through. We also experienced a vacancy and then a fulfillment of a congressional seat in the process. And so really thanking the staff for working on the fly and pushing hard for this and staying on top of all of us to really advocate for these projects because they're so critical and important. And as Mr. Menicucci said, we may not get all of them, but it's important to advocate for all of them. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Senna. Any other comments, councilors? I also want to thank Mr. Menicucci for staying on top of all of this and working with Mr. O'Donnell and his staff. I know that I received a number of calls from you regarding some of the projects in my district, which were really very important to me. So it's always good to have great staff that works with us and keeps us on track. So with that, councilors, I don't see any other comments, any other councilors. Councilor Pena to close.
Thank you, Madam President. So I too want to thank everyone. This is really a challenge as we've been meeting over the years. And I know Councilor Davis and Councilor Benton were on the committee before. And really the way we operated was we went away from earmarks, and the way we were drafting our legislation was for earmarks. So we kind of, over the past few years, we've changed it to the grant format. And then now they brought back, as Mr. Menicucci stated, is they brought back the earmark. So we went back to kind of a redraft of our legislation to include the grant opportunities plus the earmarks. And, I just want to thank the committee members. I want to thank the administration, Ms. Sarita Nair. I just appreciate all the input. As Councilor Senna said, it just takes a lot to kind of get all these projects going and getting input from all the councilors in the administration. And a special thanks to Tom. I think you keep us all on track. So thank you again, and I urge your support.
Thank you, Councilor Pena. With that, we will move to Ms. Ortega to take the vote.
Councilor Bassan.
Yes.
Councilor Benton.
Yes.
Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilor Gibson.
Yes.
Councilor Harris.
Yes.
Councilor Jones.
Yes.
Councilor Pena.
Yes.
Councilor Senna.
Yes.
Councilor Borrego.
Yes.
Passes unanimously as amended.
Thank you, councilors, for your indulgence in all of our issues. I just want to again thank our new Director of Council Services, Mr. Melendres, and kind of give him an applause if we could, just to close. Councilors, thank you. And to the public, thank you for joining us this evening. That concludes our... Oh, Councilor, yes, I'm sorry, Councilor Benton. Yes, before we close, you had a letter that you wanted to read under public comment.
Yeah. And again, I apologize. I couldn't pull this up in time when we had cut short our public comment this evening. This is from Lisa Padilla, the president of the Burles Neighborhood Association. And this is regarding the stadium project. In the last several days, I have heard from many people who are rightly incensed with the recent treatment of our neighborhoods. I would like to offer you all the chance to make things right with us. We recognize that there is a quickly impending deadline to get this measure on the ballot, and that has dictated to an extent the timeline of your activities. Sometimes when we're in a hurry, we forget to prioritize what is most important. We all do that sometimes. And we here in Morelos hear regularly about how our barrio is the heart of Albuquerque. People come to our neighborhood to feel grounded in our culture and our place. It's beautiful, welcoming, and warm. But we are more than a quaint backdrop. We have a history that is rife with trauma and disenfranchisement. Our heart is at risk. At this crucial moment, with looming gentrification and inordinate impacts, it is even more important than ever to honor and appreciate the injustices and pain Morelos has endures. As we work to uplift, preserve, and fortify what's so precious in this neighborhood, please be mindful of the impacts of your behavior. As we move forward in this process together, we as a city and as a community have the opportunity to implement this process justly in a way that truly centers on our values. We could be an example to other cities in the region and in the world of how to enact a just transition to what's truly important. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Councillor Benton. That was very important. Any questions of councillors? Thank you, councillors. With that, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.